Picture 1973. You're walking down the street in bell-bottoms, so wide they sweep the sidewalk. Your afro is picked out perfectly. Your platform shoes click with every step. People stare, and you let them. Because in the 70s, black fashion wasn't about fitting in. It was about standing out and standing up for who you were. The 1970s transformed how black Americans expressed themselves through clothing and style. Today, we're exploring 20 fashion statements that weren't just trends. They were tools of empowerment, cultural pride, and political resistance. Let's understand what each piece really meant. The shift to natural hair in the 1970s marked a profound cultural turning point. After the Civil Rights Movement, African Americans increasingly rejected chemical straightening processes and embraced their natural hair texture. The afro became the most recognizable symbol of this change. It required specific tools and techniques. The afro pick, often with a clenched fist handle, was carried openly in back pockets. This wasn't just grooming, it was a visible statement of black power. Natural hair care in the 70s was completely different from previous decades. Women stopped using hot combs that had been heated on stoves. Men let their hair grow freely. Barbers and stylists developed new skills specifically for shaping and maintaining natural styles. This movement had economic implications too. Black-owned beauty supply stores flourished. Products designed specifically for natural black hair, afro sheen, pick sets, conditioning oils, created new markets. The natural hair movement was cultural pride meeting economic empowerment. The dashiki represents one of the most significant cultural fashion statements of the 1970s. These loose-fitting, colorful garments originated in West Africa, particularly among Yoruba people in Nigeria. During the Black Power movement, dashikis became widely adopted as symbols of African heritage and rejection of Western fashion norms. The patterns held meaning. Geometric designs often represented specific African ethnic groups or regions. The fabric itself was important. Traditional dashikis used cotton with hand-printed or wax-resist dyed patterns. Colors were symbolic. Red represented blood and struggle. Black represented the people. Green represented the land. And gold represented wealth and the sun. Wearing a dashiki in 1970s America was educational activism. It sparked conversations. It made African heritage visible in predominantly white spaces. College students wore them to classes. Activists wore them to rallies and community meetings. This wasn't costume. It was reclamation of identity. Platform shoes in the 1970s served both practical and symbolic purposes. The thick soles, sometimes 3 to 5 inches high, literally elevated the wearer's height and changed their physical presence in any space. The engineering of these shoes was complex. Early platforms could be unstable. Quality varied significantly. Better-made platforms distributed weight properly and had reinforced ankle support. Cheaper versions could cause injuries. For Black Americans, platforms carried additional meaning beyond the general 70s trend. Height has historically been associated with power and authority. In a society where black people were systematically diminished, adding physical height through footwear was a form of resistance. The sound of platforms on pavement announced arrival. They couldn't be ignored. This auditory presence mattered in communities where black voices were often silenced. Every step made noise. Every step said, "I am here." Bell-bottoms originated in naval uniforms, but were transformed by 70s fashion culture. For Black Americans, these pants represented freedom of movement and rejection of restrictive, conservative dress codes. The width of the bell varied dramatically. Some flared modestly from the knee. Others had such wide openings they measured 24 inches or more around the ankle. The wider styles required platforms or thick-soled shoes to keep the hem from dragging. Bell-bottoms moved when you walked. They had rhythm built into their design. This was particularly significant in black culture, where dance and music were central. The pants themselves seemed to dance. They caught air and swayed with each step. The variety of fabrics and patterns available allowed for personal expression. Denim was common, but so were corduroy, polyester, and cotton blends. Patterns ranged from solid colors to wild prints, paisley, geometric designs, patchwork combinations. Each choice communicated something about the wearer's personality and affiliations. The black leather jacket became synonymous with black activism in the 1970s. largely due to its adoption by the Black Panther Party. But its significance extended beyond any single organization. Leather jackets provided practical protection during protests and confrontations, while also projecting strength and solidarity. The material itself was durable, weather-resistant, and long-lasting, qualities that aligned with messages of Black resilience. The styling details mattered. Wide lapels, fitted waists, and specific pocket placements created a distinctive silhouette. Some featured fringe, others were plain. Quality leather jackets were expensive, so acquiring one often involved saving money over months. These jackets transcended gender. Women and men both wore them as symbols of seriousness and commitment. Paired with berets, sunglasses, and afros, the leather jacket completed a look that communicated, "I am organized. I am prepared. I am not to be underestimated." Head coverings in the 1970s connected Black Americans directly to African traditions. The kufi, a brimless, rounded cap, has roots in West African Islamic culture. Women's head wraps, or gelis, come from various African ethnic traditions. These weren't fashion accessories borrowed casually. Many Black Americans studied the cultural significance and proper techniques. Community elders and recent African immigrants taught traditional wrapping methods. This was cultural education happening through fashion. The fabrics carried meaning. Kente cloth from Ghana, with its complex woven patterns, was highly prized. Each color and pattern combination in authentic Kente has specific symbolic meanings related to history, ethics, and spirituality. Wearing these head coverings required skill. Wrapping a proper geli could take 15 minutes or more. The height, shape, and stability of the wrap all demonstrated the wearer's knowledge and respect for the tradition. This was visible cultural literacy. Black women's hairstyles in the 1970s balanced aesthetics, practicality, and political statement. Afro puffs, sections of natural hair gathered and shaped into rounded forms, were both playful and practical. Cornrows experienced a renaissance during this period. These traditional African braiding patterns had been maintained in Black communities for generations, but gained new visibility and pride during the 70s. The braiding techniques were complex, often taking hours to complete. Cornrows with beads added another cultural layer. The beads made sound when moving, a subtle but constant reminder of African traditions. Colors and patterns of beads could indicate age, status, or personal style preferences. These hairstyles were low maintenance once completed. In an era when many Black women worked long hours and multiple jobs, protective styles that lasted weeks were both beautiful and practical. This combination of function and cultural pride made them powerful choices. Floor-length dresses and skirts became staples of Black women's wardrobes in the 1970s. This was partly influenced by African traditional dress, which often featured long, flowing garments. The maxi length was itself a statement. While mainstream fashion fluctuated between mini and midi lengths, Black women often chose full-length garments. This modesty was radical. It rejected hypersexualization of Black women's bodies. The fabrics and patterns connected to African aesthetics. Ankara prints, mudcloth patterns, and batik designs were popular. These textiles told stories. Some patterns represented specific proverbs or historical events in African cultures. Maxi dresses were also practical for all body types. They were comfortable, allowed freedom of movement, and worked in various settings from casual to formal. This democratic quality aligned with community-focused values. Hoop earrings have ancient origins across many African cultures. In the 1970s, Black American women reclaimed them as cultural symbols rather than just fashion trends. The size of hoops varied from modest to extremely large, some measuring 4 or 5 inches in diameter. Larger hoops made stronger statements. They framed the face, caught light, and drew attention. Materials reflected economic realities. Solid gold hoops were aspirational. Gold-plated and brass were more common. Some women had their names or meaningful words inscribed inside the hoops. This personalization turned jewelry into narrative. The cultural significance extended beyond aesthetics. In some African traditions, earrings marked life stages and social status. By wearing prominent hoops, Black American women connected to these traditions while asserting presence in contemporary spaces. The combination of turtleneck sweaters with vests became associated with black intellectualism and cultural sophistication in the 1970s. This look appeared frequently in academic settings, jazz clubs, and poetry venues. The turtleneck's history includes associations with beatnik culture and European intellectualism. Black Americans adapted this into their own aesthetic vocabulary. Paired with natural hairstyles and African-inspired jewelry, the turtleneck became part of a distinctly black scholarly presentation. Colors were typically earth tones, browns, tans, burnt oranges, deep reds. These colors complemented darker skin tones while maintaining a serious, professional appearance. This was important in predominantly white institutions, where black scholars had to navigate complex social dynamics. The vest added structure and formality, without the constraints of full suits. This was professional attire that didn't mimic white corporate culture. It was black excellence on its own terms. Jumpsuits became remarkably popular in the 1970s across all demographics, but held particular appeal in black communities. These one-piece garments combined top and bottom, eliminating the need to coordinate separate pieces. The practical advantages were significant. For working people with limited time and wardrobes, jumpsuits simplified getting dressed. They were also economical, one garment instead of two. Styling varied dramatically. Some jumpsuits were fitted and tailored, others loose and comfortable. Fabrics ranged from denim to polyester to cotton blends. Colors and patterns followed the bold aesthetic of the decade. Jumpsuits allowed for creative accessorizing. A simple jumpsuit could be dressed up with jewelry, belts, and shoes, or kept casual. This versatility made them practical investments for people on tight budgets who still wanted style. Dark sunglasses became ubiquitous in black fashion during the 1970s, serving multiple purposes beyond sun protection. They were worn indoors, at night, in all seasons. The styles evolved throughout the decade. Aviators became associated with cool sophistication. Oversized rounded frames suggested artistry. Colored lenses, amber, blue, green, added personality. Functionally, sunglasses provided emotional protection. They allowed the wearer to observe without revealing reactions. In confrontational situations with authorities or in predominantly white spaces, this buffer was valuable. Sunglasses also evoked the mystique of black musicians and activists. Miles Davis, Stevie Wonder, and Black Panther members all wore distinctive eyewear. Everyday people could adopt this element of iconic style. Hats experienced a revival in the 1970s, particularly wide-brimmed styles. These ranged from floppy felt hats to structured fedoras to straw sun hats. In black culture, hat wearing has deep traditions, particularly in church settings. The 70s adapted this tradition into everyday wear. Hats became part of the complete ensemble rather than just Sunday attire. The wide brim served practical purposes, sun protection, weather shielding. But the dramatic visual impact was equally important. A good hat created a silhouette that demanded attention and respect. Hat etiquette remained important. Men tipped hats in greeting. Hats were removed indoors in certain settings, kept on in others. This awareness of tradition within innovation characterized much of 70s black fashion. Not all fashion statements required purchasing new items. The 1970s saw flourishing creativity in customizing and personalizing clothing. Patchwork became fashionable rather than a mark of poverty. Jeans were deliberately patched, with contrasting fabrics. Shirts were embellished with embroidery, fabric paint, or applique. This transformed old clothes into unique pieces. Many black households had skilled seamstresses, mothers, grandmothers, aunts who could create custom garments. Patterns were adapted, fabrics combined, styles invented. This home-based fashion production was economic necessity and artistic expression. The DIY approach also represented resistance to consumer culture. It said, "We don't need your mass-produced clothes. We can create our own style." This self-sufficiency aligned with broader black power principles of self-determination. The 1970s color palette for black fashion was dramatically different from previous decades. Bright, saturated colors dominated: oranges, purples, electric blues, vibrant greens, hot pinks. This represented rejection of respectability politics that had encouraged black people to dress conservatively in muted tones. Bright colors were visibility. They were joy. They were refusal to blend in. Pattern mixing became common. geometric prints with florals, stripes with plaids. This broke fashion rules deliberately. It created visual interest and expressed individuality. African-inspired patterns held special significance. Kent cloth patterns, mud cloth designs, and Adinkra symbols connected wearers to cultural heritage. Understanding these patterns' meanings added depth to fashion choices. The Afro pick transcended its practical function to become a cultural symbol. These picks were designed specifically for styling natural African textured hair. The most iconic picks featured handles shaped like clenched fists. The Black Power salute. This merged grooming tool with political symbol. Carrying this pick visibly was a statement of solidarity and pride. Pick designs varied. Some were simple plastic. Others featured carved wooden handles. Metal picks were durable but could heat up uncomfortably in sun. Each person had preferences based on hair texture and desired style. The public act of using the pick mattered. Stopping on a street corner to shape your afro wasn't vanity. It was maintenance of your natural crown. It was refusing to hide this grooming as something shameful. The 1970s featured a trend toward fitted clothing that showed body shape. This was significant for Black people, particularly Black women, whose bodies had been subject to racist stereotyping and hypersexualization. Fitted shirts, pants, and dresses celebrated natural body diversity. They rejected the shapeless, conservative styles that attempted to minimize curves and features. This was body positivity before the term existed. The fitted trend worked across fashion styles. Whether wearing African-inspired clothing or mainstream fashion, the emphasis was on garments that acknowledged and celebrated the body underneath. This required confidence. Wearing clothes that revealed your shape meant accepting your body publicly. In Black communities building pride after centuries of being told their bodies were wrong, this was revolutionary. Jewelry in the 1970s tended toward large, substantial pieces. Multiple bracelets stacked on arms. Layered necklaces. Rings on multiple fingers. Large pendants. For Black communities, jewelry served multiple purposes. It was aesthetic enhancement. It was cultural expression, particularly when featuring African symbols. It was also economic investment. Gold and silver held value. In communities with limited access to traditional banking and investment systems, wearing wealth made sense. Jewelry could be sold in emergencies. It was portable, personal wealth. The materials varied based on economic means. Those who could afford it invested in solid gold. Others chose quality-plated pieces. Some wore natural materials, wood, bone, shells, that connected to African traditions. Knee-high boots became essential footwear for Black women in the 1970s. These boots were often platform-soled, adding height and presence. The coverage boots provided was both practical and symbolic. They protected legs in various weather conditions. They also created a powerful silhouette, legs covered, stride confident, presence undeniable. Styling options were diverse. Boots could be worn over pants, tucked into boots, or paired with skirts and dresses. Leather, vinyl, and suede versions existed across price points. The sound of boots on pavement contributed to their impact. Like platform shoes, boots announced arrival audibly. This sensory presence, visual and auditory, made the wearer impossible to ignore.